There is an invisible, bloodless battlefield where more human potential, more magnificent dreams, and more empires have been utterly destroyed than in any physical war recorded in the history of our species. That catastrophic, silent battlefield is the dark, echoing space between your own ears. You know the profound, suffocating exhaustion of this invisible war.
You know the heavy, agonizing sensation of waking up in the morning, already feeling completely drained, because your brain spent the entire night fighting violent, desperate battles against ghosts that do not even exist. You know the sickening paralysis of staring at a simple, mundane email, analyzing the tone of the words 50 different ways, terrified of making the wrong move. You watch the fleeting, irreplaceable moments of your life pass you by while you remain entirely frozen, trapped inside a mental simulation, meticulously calculating everything that could possibly go wrong. You create complex, multi-layered contingency plans for conversations that will never actually happen. You are an architect building magnificent, heavy castles in the clouds, and you are slowly suffocating because there is no oxygen up there. You believe you are being highly intelligent. You believe you are protecting yourself through preparation. But you are not. You are simply suffering twice. Listen to me with absolute, unwavering clarity. This exhausting, endless loop of overthinking is not a sign of your superior intelligence, and it is not a fundamental flaw in your character. It is a biological mechanism operating in a state of catastrophic overdrive. You possess an ancient, highly evolved neurological system known as the prediction machine. In the primitive, brutal world of our ancestors, the brain was hardwired to constantly scan the horizon for lethal threats. Its primary job was to simulate worst-case scenarios, the lurking predator, the approaching winter, to keep you alive. But in our modern, physically safe reality, this ancient survival hardware has nothing physical to hunt. So it turns inward. It transforms everyday uncertainties into life or death crises. It hijacks your nervous system, turning you into a helpless, shivering prisoner of your own sophisticated anxiety. Today, we are going to march directly into that chaotic labyrinth and burn those exhausting simulations to the ground. I am going to reveal the 4 absolute laws of the Ancient Spartan Code of mental warfare. The first 3 laws will teach you how to forge an impenetrable shield, how to sharpen the spear of your focus, and how to violently cut away the dead weight of your past. But listen with absolute, unshakable reverence. The 4th law is the dark abyss. It is the terrifying threshold where an estimated 95% of people step back in horror and fail, because it demands that you look directly into the eyes of your absolute worst nightmare and smile. If you are truly ready to abandon the exhausting theater of your mind and assume the heavy, silent posture of a warrior, walk with me now. Settle your breath deeply into your abdomen. Anchor your physical weight to the dense earth beneath you. Let the frantic, buzzing noise of your imaginary futures fall completely silent. To master the mind, we must first understand the devastating physics of how it breaks. We must travel to the blood-soaked plains of ancient Greece to understand the first law of mental warfare, the law of the Phalanx and the shield of the present. The overthinking mind operates under a deeply toxic, deeply arrogant illusion. It believes that by constantly abandoning the present moment to sprint into the future, by obsessively calculating 1,000 different hypothetical scenarios, it is somehow gaining control over reality. You believe that if you just think hard enough, long enough, and deep enough about a problem, you can build a magical armor against pain and failure. You are terrified of making a mistake, so you choose the most dangerous path of all. You remain paralyzed.
You must realize that trying to control the infinite chaotic variables of the future through pure thought is like trying to catch the ocean in a net. It only leaves you wet, exhausted, and holding empty air. Consider the ancient Spartan warriors, the most feared and disciplined military force in the history of the world. The absolute core of their invincibility was not their individual physical strength, it was their formation, the Phalanx.
A solid, impenetrable wall of bronze shields and heavy wooden spears. When the Spartan army marched into the chaos of battle, With the deafening screams of the enemy, the raining arrows, and the overwhelming scent of blood in the air, the individual soldier did not look at the entire battlefield. He did not let his mind wander to the thousands of possible ways the battle could go wrong. He did not simulate his own death. The heavy bronze shield, the aspis, weighed over 30 pounds. It was cumbersome and required immense physical endurance to hold steady. But the Spartan knew that his life and the life of his brother beside him depended entirely on the brutal discipline of holding that weight in the present reality. He could not afford the luxury of daydreaming. He could not afford the indulgence of anxiety. The discipline of the Spartan was violently simple. He had only two responsibilities. First, to hold the ground of his own specific square meter. Second, to lock his heavy bronze shield with the man standing directly to his left. He anchored his consciousness entirely, completely, and without exception, in the absolute present moment of his physical reality. When you overthink, you are breaking the psychological phalanx. You are dropping the heavy shield of the present moment. You are abandoning the only place where you actually have any true power, and you are running alone, naked and defenseless, into the dark, unpredictable horizon of the future to fight an army of imaginary ghosts. And the biological consequence of this desertion is absolutely devastating. Modern neuroscience calls this anticipatory stress. Your limbic system, the primitive emotional center of your brain, cannot distinguish between a physical threat standing directly in front of you and a catastrophic scenario you have vividly painted in your imagination. When you sit in a perfectly safe, quiet room and simulate the loss of your job, the rejection of a partner, or the public humiliation of a failure, your brain instantly triggers the massive release of cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your heart rate accelerates. Your digestion shuts down. Your muscles tense. Do you understand the profound tragedy of this biological reaction? You are physically bleeding for a war that has not even started. You are experiencing the full, devastating physiological trauma of a wound that does not actually exist. You are exhausting your vital life force fighting shadows, so that when the real challenge finally arrives, when you actually need your strength, you have absolutely nothing left in your reserves. To apply the law of the Phalanx, you must cultivate the ruthless, martial discipline of anchoring your consciousness. When you feel the familiar, sickening spiral of overthinking begin, when the hypothetical questions start whispering in the dark theater of your mind, you must recognize that you are breaking formation. You must violently pull your attention back to your square meter. In the Shaolin temple, we call this returning to the center. The center is not a mystical, magical place. It is the brutal, undeniable reality of the physical present. The anxious mind is a kite caught in a violent hurricane, desperate to fly away into the chaotic skies of the future. Your breath, your physical body, is the heavy iron stake driven deep into the ground. You must pull the string. You must reel the kite back, millimeter by millimeter, against the howling wind of your own panic. You focus entirely on the deep, mechanical rhythm of your breathing. You feel the cold texture of the floor beneath your feet. You do not argue with the anxiety. Arguing with the anxiety is just another form of engaging with the enemy in the future. You simply refuse to participate. You raise the bronze shield of the now, completely blocking out the arrows of the later. You tell your frantic, overactive mind, we are not fighting tomorrow's battles today. We are only holding this specific inch of ground. This is not a passive meditation. It is an aggressive, dominant act of psychological warfare. You are cutting off the oxygen supply to your anxieties. You are starving the future of your vital energy. By mastering the law of the Phalanx, you reclaim the absolute sovereignty of the present moment. You stop simulating the pain of 1,000 imaginary deaths, and you gather all of your kinetic power into the single, undeniable reality of the step you are taking right now. But defending the present moment is only the foundation of the warrior's mind. Once you have raised the shield and stopped the chaotic bleeding of your energy, you must learn how to move forward. You must learn how to strike. Because the overthinking mind is not just a master of creating anxiety, it is the ultimate architect of paralysis. To break free from the chains of hesitation, you must learn the devastating physics of the spear, the law of imperfect action. You have successfully anchored your mind. You have raised the heavy bronze shield of the present moment, cutting off the chaotic, bleeding energy of anticipatory stress. You have starved the ghosts of tomorrow by refusing to leave the square meter of today. But a fortress that only defends is a fortress that is slowly waiting to be destroyed. A warrior who only hides behind a shield will eventually be outflanked, exhausted, and crushed by the relentless, sheer weight of the enemy's assault. To reclaim the absolute sovereignty of your life, you cannot merely survive your thoughts, you must conquer them. You must step out from behind the bronze. You must learn how to strike. The deepest, most paralyzing trap of the overthinking mind is its pathological addiction to certainty. When you face a decision, whether it is launching a business, ending a toxic relationship, or changing the entire trajectory of your life, your unmastered brain panics. It looks at the vast, terrifying landscape of the unknown, and it absolutely refuses to step forward until it has a perfect, flawless map. You create 100 different options. You meticulously weigh the pros and the cons. You read another book. You ask for another opinion. You tell yourself that you just need to research a little more, that you just need to wait for the exact, perfect moment when you feel completely ready. Listen to the cold, heavy truth. You will never feel completely ready. The perfect moment is a ghost. It is a psychological hallucination created by your ego to protect you from the possibility of failure. What you call preparation is actually a highly sophisticated, deeply deceptive form of cowardice. You are using analysis as a hiding place. You believe that by thinking endlessly about the problem, you are doing the work. But you are not doing the work. You are spinning the tires of your mind in a frictionless vacuum, burning massive amounts of mental fuel, exhausting your engine, while your vehicle does not move a single inch forward. In the brutal, unforgiving theater of ancient warfare, the Spartan hoplite carried the dory, a heavy ashwood spear spanning 7 to 9 feet in length. When the armies clashed and the Phalanx lines collided, the noise was deafening. The pressure was suffocating. In that terrifying, chaotic crush of bronze and flesh, the Spartan did not have the luxury of absolute certainty. He did not stand frozen on the battlefield, calculating the exact wind resistance, analyzing the molecular density of the enemy's armor, or debating the optimal, mathematically perfect trajectory for his strike. If he paused to analyze, the blade of his enemy would instantly pierce his throat. The Spartan understood a fundamental law of physics and survival. Momentum is infinitely more valuable than perfection. The warrior simply grips the heavy wood, selects a target, and thrusts the spear with absolute, unhesitating, violent commitment. He trusts the muscle memory of his training. He takes the action. If his spear strikes a shield and bounces off, he does not collapse into a spiral of self-doubt. He does not stop the war to analyze why he failed. He instantly absorbs the kinetic feedback of the physical world. He recalibrates his grip, and he strikes again. The overthinking mind demands a guarantee of success before it moves. The warrior mind moves to guarantee that it discovers the truth. You must deeply internalize the neuroscience of this martial philosophy. Why does your mind spin into endless, terrifying loops of anxiety? Because as long as you remain in the realm of pure thought, your brain has no actual physical data to process. It is trapped in a dark room with a terrifying imagination. The moment you take an action, no matter how small, no matter how imperfect, you suddenly force your brain to collide with physical reality. You create friction. When you finally send that difficult email, when you finally publish your work, when you finally speak the hard truth, the universe instantly provides you with tactile, undeniable feedback. Your brain is forcefully pulled out of the dark, swirling clouds of hypothetical simulation, and it is slammed into the sharp, clear light of the present execution. It has to stop hallucinating about what might happen, because it suddenly has a massive amount of real-world kinetic data that it must process right now. Action is the ultimate, undeniable neurological kill switch for overthinking. In the Shaolin tradition, we observe the terrifying, unstoppable power of a mountain river. When the rushing water encounters a massive, jagged boulder blocking its path, the water does not pause at the top of the mountain to hold a committee meeting. It does not calculate the exact volume of the rock or worry about looking foolish if it takes the wrong path. The water simply flows forward, crashes violently into the stone, instantly realizes the path is blocked, and fluidly wraps itself around the obstacle to continue its descent. The water is entirely liberated from anxiety because it never stops moving. It allows the physical friction of the world to dictate its course. You must become the water. You must become the heavy, thrusting spear. You must abandon the pathetic, exhausting pursuit of the perfect decision, and you must embrace the terrifying power of the imperfect action. Understand this clearly. It is infinitely better to make the wrong decision with 100% of your vital energy and total violence of action than to make the perfect decision with hesitation and doubt. When you act boldly, even if you make a mistake, you are generating momentum. You are stepping into the arena. You are forcing the universe to reveal its cards. You can always correct a moving ship, but you can never steer a ship that is securely anchored in the harbor of its own fear. The next time you find yourself paralyzed by analysis, staring at a crossroad, and terrified of choosing the wrong path, you must invoke the discipline of the Spartan. You raise the shield to block out the noise of the future. You lower your center of gravity. You pick a target, and you simply strike. You execute the imperfect action. You let the fragile illusion of certainty shatter, and you let the raw, heavy reality of movement silence the chaotic voices in your head. You have anchored your mind in the present. You have shattered the paralysis of analysis by committing to the forward momentum of the spear. You have begun to march across the battlefield of reality. But as you move, you will quickly realize a devastating truth. You are exhausted not because the march is hard, but because you are dragging an agonizing, suffocating amount of invisible weight. You are trying to move like a warrior, but you are carrying the baggage of a refugee. This brings us to the third law of mental warfare, the burning of the supplies, the ruthless law of psychological detachment. The overthinking mind is a scavenger. It is a hoarder of ghosts. It spends thousands of calories of your vital energy every single day clinging to two specific types of dead weight that serve no purpose other than to sink your ship. The first is the rotting corpse of the past. The mistakes you made, the opportunities you missed, the should-have-saids, and the could-have-beens. The second is the crushing, imaginary weight of other people's opinions, the desperate, pathetic need to be understood, validated, or liked by a world that is just as confused as you are. You believe that by constantly replaying your past failures, you are somehow learning from them. You are not. You are merely pickling your brain in the acid of regret. You believe that by obsessively calculating how your actions will be perceived by others, you are protecting your reputation. You are not. You are merely handing the remote control of your nervous system to a crowd of strangers who aren't even watching you. In the ancient world, when a Spartan commander landed his fleet on a hostile shore, he understood a psychological reality that modern men have forgotten. He knew that as long as his soldiers could see their ships anchored safely in the harbor, as long as they knew there was a way to retreat to their old lives, they would never fight with their full, terrifying potential. They would always be overthinking the exit strategy. They would always be holding back 10% of their courage. So, the commander would give a single, brutal order. Burn the ships. He would stand on the sand and watch the massive wooden vessels, the only way home, the only link to the past, be consumed by fire. As the smoke rose into the sky, the soldiers realized with a cold, visceral shock that there was no more yesterday. There was no more safety. There was only the objective in front of them and the reality of the ground beneath them. By burning the supplies, the commander silenced the overthinking mind. He forced his men into a state of absolute singular focus. To crush your overthinking, You must become the commander of your own soul and set fire to your psychological ships. You must perform a ruthless, daily execution of your own history. In the Stoic traditions of Rome and the Zen monasteries of the East, we teach the discipline of the Great Death. This is the realization that the version of you that existed 5 minutes ago is already dead. The mistake you made yesterday happened to a person who no longer exists. Why are you still carrying the heavy, stinking corpse of that person's failure around with you? Why are you letting a ghost dictate the movement of the living warrior? You must realize that your overthinking is fueled by your attachment to a specific identity. You are thinking too much because you are trying to protect a self that is fragile. You are afraid that if you act and fail, your self will be diminished. You are afraid that if people judge you, your self will be wounded. The Spartan Code demands that you abandon the self to save the mission. When you march, you do not carry your trophies and you do not carry your scars. You carry only your shield and your spear. You must learn the martial art of indifference. You must reach a point of sovereign maturity where the praise of the world does not inflate you, and the criticism of the world does not deflate you. The neuroscience of this detachment is profound. When you stop caring about things you cannot control, such as the past or the internal thoughts of other people, you are effectively shutting down the massive, energy-draining circuits of the default mode network in your brain. This is the area responsible for self-referential thought and rumination. By burning these supplies, you free up a massive reservoir of cognitive energy. You become lighter, you become faster. You become a fluid, adaptive force of nature that can maneuver through the chaos of life without getting snagged on the thorns of ego. Imagine you are climbing a steep, jagged mountain. The air is thin. Every step requires absolute effort. Most people try to make this climb while carrying a massive backpack filled with heavy stones. One stone is a snide comment from a coworker. Another stone is a failed relationship from 5 years ago. Another stone is the fear of looking stupid in front of their neighbors. They are gasping for air, their knees are buckling, and they are overthinking every step because the weight is making them unstable. The warrior looks at the backpack, realizes it contains nothing but rocks, and simply unbuckles the straps. He lets the weight crash down the mountainside. He doesn't look back. He doesn't apologize to the rocks. He just feels the sudden, intoxicating lightness in his spine. He feels the rush of oxygen in his lungs. He moves. You must stop seeking closure for things that are over. You must stop seeking permission from people who have no authority over your soul. You must burn the supplies of your need to be right and your need to be understood. The truth does not need a lawyer, and a warrior does not need an audience. Your only obligation is to the integrity of the strike you are making right now. But even after you have anchored yourself in the present, even after you have embraced imperfect action, and even after you have burned the dead weight of your ego, there remains one final terrifying obstacle. It is the hidden root of all overthinking. It is the dark master that pulls the strings of every what-if and every moment of hesitation. To truly crush the mind's rebellion, you must face the law of the fatal blade. Why do you think too much? If you strip away the layers of logic, the excuses of preparation, and the masks of caution, what is left at the very bottom? It is the primal, shivering fear of pain. It is the desperate, frantic attempt of your ego to ensure that you never fail, that you are never rejected, and that you never have to face the cold reality of your own limitations. Overthinking is nothing more than a sophisticated, psychological avoidance tactic. You simulate the war because you are terrified of the wound. This is the exact threshold where an estimated 95% of humanity fails. Most people can learn to be more present. They can learn to take a few small risks, and they can even let go of some minor regrets. But when they reach the precipice of a truly life-defining decision, the kind of decision that carries the risk of total, public failure or absolute, agonizing rejection, their discipline collapses. They retreat into the labyrinth of one more day of thinking. They choose the slow rot of safety over the sharp, clean strike of the warrior. They die 1,000 deaths in their imagination because they are too afraid to face the possibility of one real death in the physical world. The Spartan Code offers a brutal, terrifyingly effective alternative. It is the practice of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, taken to its ultimate martial conclusion. The Spartans did not march into battle hoping to survive. They marched as men who had already accepted their own death. They performed a psychological execution of their own future before the first spear was ever leveled. By embracing the fatal blade in their minds long before it reached their bodies, they achieved something that 95% of the world will never comprehend. They achieved absolute, terrifying mental silence. When you accept, with cold and total clarity, the absolute worst-case scenario, when you look at the possibility of losing your money, your reputation, or your comfort, and you say, "Even then, I will remain unshakable." The overthinking mind has nowhere left to hide. The what-if loses its venom. The brain stops spinning its wheels because it has already reached the end of the road. If you are terrified of starting that business because you might go broke, you must sit in the dark and vividly imagine yourself losing every penny. Feel the cold, see the empty room, hear the silence of the failure, and then realize that your sovereign soul is still intact. If you are terrified of speaking your truth because you might be rejected, imagine the door closing, the silence of the room, and the weight of being alone. And then realize that your integrity is still standing. When you embrace the fatal blade, you are not being a pessimist. You are being an apex strategist. You are removing the only leverage that fear has over your nervous system. You stop preventing the storm, and you become the mountain that the storm breaks against. The silence that follows this acceptance is not the silence of a void. It is the silence of a loaded weapon. It is the quiet, heavy focus of a man who has nothing left to lose, and therefore has the entire world to gain. You have been a prisoner of your own brilliance for too long. You have used your magnificent mind to build a cage of maybe and a prison of later. You have allowed the ghosts of 1,000 unlived lives to haunt your present moment. But you now possess the ancient, heavy tools of the warrior. You have the shield to guard your now. You have the spear to strike through the paralysis. You have the fire to burn the ships of your ego. And you have the courage to embrace the blade. I know the deep, secret exhaustion you carry. I know the weight of the armor you wear when you are fighting battles that no one else can see. I know the loneliness of being trapped in a mind that never stops screaming for certainty in an uncertain world. You were taught that your overthinking made you safe. You were lied to. It only made you a spectator in your own life. You stand now at the final gates. The ancient code has been whispered into your spirit. The neurobiology of your freedom has been mapped. The heavy iron gates of the labyrinth are open. Tomorrow, when the sun rises and the first shadow of a doubt begins to flicker in your mind, when the voices of hesitation begin their frantic, pathetic whispering, what will you do? Will you retreat once more into the suffocating, dark theater of your own thoughts to simulate a life you are too afraid to lead? Or will you finally draw the blade, step onto the blood-soaked ground of reality, and silence the ghosts forever? The choice is yours. The path is open. Amituofo.